Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar where we will discuss about IBM software licensing. We'll just give 1 minute for the people that are in the waiting room to be cleared, and then we will start with our session. Thank you. I think everyone is cleared for now. So welcome to this webinar organized by Kisalu Consulting and sponsored by 4Levels IT Solutions. This morning, we are honored to be with you. We thank you for your time. And as part of the logistics, we will say that we'll go through the presentation and the questions will be at the end. You can also send your questions into the chat. The team will look at them, and we're recording the session. So if you will send the replay links to everyone, and also it is on YouTube into the Kisalu Consulting channel. Welcome. So we will go through the what is a PVU and why we have ILMT. As I said, it was this session is sponsored by 4Levels IT, which is a training and services company working with Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, and others in terms of training and services. We have a disclaimer for this session, this webinar. We did not contact IBM for it, and yes, we are an IBM business partner, but this is done independently. We also claim that ILMT is registered with IBM, VMware belongs to VMware, Hyper-V belongs to Hyper-V, and BigFix belongs to HCL. IBM license metric tool and the processor value unit is a story of software, services, and money. The agenda includes a review of people, performance, and engine. We'll look at definitions that are relevant here. We'll see the counting of cores. And then lastly, we will go to the PVU, what it is, and why we have ILMT. In the context of performance, we take note that if you're working alone in a field, it is obvious that it will take you more time if you are performing into that field compared to a number of people, multiple people that will be allocated the same amount of work in the same field. So performance given by one person in a field is different from the one that a group of people will give to the same field. We also know that engines started long time ago, and we had one-cylinder engines that did power our motion in the past, and Then we moved to multiple cylinders engine. We know if you compare the two, that the multiple cylinder engine will perform better, will perform faster, and render services the quickest possible if you take into account for the same reference of work to be done. So engines matter. In terms of computing, we also talk of engines. So our engine here is what is called the central processing unit, which powers the computers everywhere. So in the same context, one person or one engine, one cylinder, multiple cylinders. Here, we also talk of one engine or equivalent of cylinders as well, just for a better understanding so that we can compare. So the story of computers is a story of performance, and the race for performance is centralized mainly, but not necessarily, into the engine. We go through some definitions. Here we have what is called the CPU, the engine, which is a number of resources for a partition or a system. It includes the core, the chip, the socket, and other relevant items that form part of the system. As part of the core in this session, that is a single physical processing unit, as you see in the image. And the chip is that integrated circuit that holds the core, simply put. And then the socket is the physical connector that is getting the chip into the motherboard. And then IBM defines a processor as that core that is on the chip. Unlike other middlewares, each of them has a definite way of explaining what they understand as a processor. But for IBM, the processor will be that core that will be on the chip. As another view of the same definition, we'll see that a single core is a single processor is a single core on a single chip, like we've seen previously. And if we talk of multiple core processor, is two or more cores that are attached to a single chip. Then came 1996, where IBM announced that they managed to slot in two cores into one silicon chip, which was quite new that time. And came 2006, where Mr. Yoshida unveiled the two core in one chip, which is what we call a dual core. So the story of software licensing is a story of software, services, and money. We go as part of understanding where we're going with the PVU. We want to know how to count those cores. Here, just imagine one system. Yes, we're coming from the story of the performance. Just imagine one system or one partition which has one CPU. And in terms of our understanding here, we see that this CPU has one chip and that chip has one core. Then if a system has two CPUs, we can consider that if that system, if the two CPUs each has one core, then the total system will have two cores. So this system, if you have to license a software, the IBM software on this system, which has two CPUs, and each CPU has one core, so you will have to license two cores. Then the race for getting more performance, more cores slotted into a chip continued, as we've seen in 1996 and 2006. So if you have a system which has one CPU and two cores, which is called dual core, then the total cores that you will license as per IBM licensing system, it will be two cores. The race continued, so people could get two slots of CPUs. Then if we have two CPUs and we have each of the CPUs has two cores in it, it means that system or that partition which has two dual core will have to be licensed for 4 cores in terms of IP. The race was becoming hot, so more and more technologies were coming and people were able to slot now 4 cores into a chip. So that one CPU which has one chip could hold 4 cores called quad core, which means a system which is running one CPU that has 4 cores or a quad core will be licensed for the total cores of 4 as per IP. Going forward again, if you have 2 CPUs in a system and that each CPU has 4 cores, meaning that these 4 cores are sitting on one chip and another 4 cores on another chip. So you have a dual quad core on that system. You will be licensed for 8 cores. The race continued for higher performance, meaning that if you have higher performance, there is some other advantages. You could use less power and so on. Now, we have in this situation one system which has one CPU, and that CPU had a chip. On that chip, they could slot 8 cores, which is an octa-core. This system will then be licensed for 8 cores. Same, we have 2 CPUs. Each of them has 8 cores, and the dual octa-core will be licensed for 16 cores. The race continues until now. We can read that this company, Ampere Ultra, could slot 80 cores on a chip. And in 2021, they're looking at 128 cores. And we don't know about the future. So people continue to innovate. People continue to come up with new technologies, new types of processors in the market. And it is very difficult if you are selling software to have specific differentiation for each of the systems that is coming in terms of speed, in terms of how they slot onto the chip. Remember the story of performance. If you are higher performing, you will work more. It means you will produce more. If you have a car with a lot more cylinders, it will chow a lot more petrol and it will produce higher speed. So if you're talking about software, it's the same. if you look at, you take software as a fuel, it means it will consume more. How do you sell your software in such an environment? It's not easy. How do you charge the people with multiple systems? A market which has multiple systems, multiple technologies. So, and where people have different cores in different technologies. So came the idea to say, let's imagine one unit, it's imaginary, it's a unit that has, let's say, 100% performance. And in the market, we will have some processes that will come, some will perform less than that unit, and some will perform at highest level than that unit. That is how the referential system called processor value unit was born, to say that we will give a value to this processor compared to that one which we imagine as a reference. So you will see now that IBM said we will create a table for every commercial software technology that's coming, processor technology that's coming. If we need to sell our software based on those technologies at customers, we will need to refer to this table for us to know how much value, how much power, how much performance we're giving to that particular processor. So they came with that table. And the table is called processor value unit table, where they align for each processor that comes out around the world for it to be like accredited as per IBM selling software selling processes. It has to be accredited in that table. If it is not, it means when you are selling it, you might, or you are buying it, or you are using the software on that type of processor, it is not covered into the IBM software selling scheme. So you have some of the processors that are valued at 50 value units, some of them at 70, some of them at 100, meaning they are exactly the same as the imaginary processor. Some of them are higher than that, so they are beyond. So some can be 150. So they do examine every processor that comes out of the market and then upload it into the table. If it is not, then it means it's not covered by the agreement that you signed with the IBM. So came 2006, they made an announcement, and from April 2005, where the chips were like very differentiated, IBM was now licensing per core, per unit of processing power that is on the chip. And then that was the value unit licensing scheme that was introduced since then. For you to count your PVUs, your processor value unit, you will need to understand that processor technology in terms of the manufacturer, who manufactured it, what is the type, what is the model number, what is the number of CPU in that model, because it does count, and how many processor cores are being used by the IBM software that you want to purchase or you want to sell. So the PVU table is also online into the IBM Passport Advantage site, where you can easily go and look at the same thing that we align there. So you look at the architecture, the brand, the processor brand, the processor type, the model, then it will give you automatically what is the value that IBM gives to that unit. Then if you know how many you want the software to be linked to be used on that system, it will then give you the total value that you will have to license. If we look at here the architecture, we take the risk architecture. There is a whole list of server vendor brands that are part of the risk architecture. So you can select, let's select Oracle Blade, for example. The risk Oracle Blade also has a number of processes. Here we selected the Oracle Spark T4, and it is a multi-core system for all existing processes. IBM says it has a value of 70 per processor. So if you have two cores that are being used by a software, you will then have to license 140. Here is a Itanium architecture, HP Integrity Intel Itanium processor. We see there's a single core, quad core, dual core. Here we selected quad core, and we say we will use two processors for our software, which is the IBM software. But IBM gives each core a value of 100. So if we're using two, it means we will have to license 200 units. Another example is on your x86 architecture. We chose here the IBM Blade Center. There is a whole list of processor brands that are part of the IBM Blade Center, and we chose the Xeon Scalable, which is, it has 4 sockets. So you need to know how many sockets are on the machine that you want to use the software for. And there, if you look at, it also says that in terms of the model, we have platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. And we saying that in our target machine, where we want to run the IBM software, we will need to use 2 processors, LPAR or so. And for this Xeon multi-core platinum, the value that IBM says it has, it's 120, the value unit per core. Meaning if we want to license the software for this system, we will need to license 240 units. Again, another example, x86, Sunblade, AMD Optron, multi-core, all existing for anything any processor that's on this system. They are giving it a value unit per core of 50. If we are saying our software will run on a machine that has 4 cores, it means we will need to license 200 units. The last one, maybe, here we are not sure about the architecture. It's not yet licensed, certified by IBM or so. So we don't know the brand as well. We don't know anything about it. Each core for any existing core will have a value of 100. So if our software will be used with 2 cores, then we will need to license 200 units. So that's it for us to calculate the number of value units, of processor value units that we need on a system. As we know the details about the manufacturer and so on, we need to know the number of cores that the IBM software will use. And then we take the number of those cores with the value units per core that we see on the PVU table. Then it gives us the total number of cores that will be licensed for the software. Then the advances of technologies continued. There is now what we call hypervisors. They allow you to run, to reduce your costs, to run a software on top of a system, which allows you to create multiple what are called virtual machines, which will look like independent machines with their own IPs, if you are external to a company or to that system, you will really not know that all these 3 machines are running from just one system. So the hypervisors allow you to do that, to really create smaller machines. It saves us time in terms of maintenance, in terms of support on because you're working on a smaller number of equipment, and it also reduces the cost indirectly in terms of electricity, in terms of cooling, and so on. So there is advantages in a lot of them in using hypervisors. In fact, I believe most big commercial companies or corporate companies use hypervisors nowadays. That is the beauty of it. But it brought its own set of problems. If you are buying now a IBM software with the models that we saw, if you need to license, because here the software are running on those machines, on those smaller partitions that are out there. So if this machine has been partitioned and you are running a homegrown application there, which is linked to the IBM MQ or linked to the IBM DB2, then you will have to license these 2 machines for the cores that are in there. Which means if you look at the previous examples, here we will license 2 cores and there we will license 4 cores, depending on the technology. So you will have the virtual cores and you will then license your virtual cores for those technologies. The problem is that these hypervisors also allow you to, as you are in production, as you've been licensed to 2 cores, remember we said you pay per core. The performance of the engine depends on how many cores you have. Now here, you are licensed for 2 cores, and yet the hypervisors allow you at higher times, month end or end of the year, or where you need a lot more power, you need in your queue, you need to clear the queue quicker. You then can take one processor there and slot it there. So you can move, you can power this machine to the highest performance that the environment allows you. So if we look at the licensing perspective now, there is no way that IBM will know that you powered your machine at a certain moment in the year or a certain moment in the month. You might be doing it every 25th when you pay your people, or if you are a revenue, like your revenue-oriented organizations, maybe collecting revenues from the citizens. So somehow you, at the highest times of the year, you then pump your machine so that it can process quicker the requests that are coming. Here you are like cheating, or you are using the software not with the money that you agreed to pay. For this reason then, because now after using it, then you decide, oh, now I finished processing whatever I had to process, and you bring it back to 2. So IBM will come, you'll tell them, no, we only using 2, but IBM and some other vendors as well, they all do it. They will know that you have the ability to move, to power this machine at highest level. So there is no way to monitor that. That is how ILMT was born, to say, because we can't see what you do with this system, because if you power this system to the higher level of the performance, you need actually to pay more. And because we can't see it, then we come with a rule that the moment you use any hypervisor and you split your partitions there and you use IBM software, you are compelled by legally by a rule to use ILMT, to install ILMT so that it can monitor how you are using the system, how much power it has over time. So that is how ILMT was born. So running any IBM software in virtualized environment made it mandatory that you need to put ILMT so that it can monitor how much you are using. The rules are, if you are using these systems and you don't have ILMT, remember you are using, you say you are using 3 cores here and you are paying for 3 cores. If you do not have ILMT, they will charge you for what is called the full capacity. Instead of 3, you will pay 8. You'll pay for 8 cores, the full capacity of that machine. And if you are running this with 1 core, because there are people that are running with 1 core and you don't have ILMT, when they come after 90 days, you will be charged with the full core. Plus, if there is a way to show that you've been using it right for long, they will charge you for the full capacity for 2 years. That is the fine. And it can run into million. Imagine you have 1 LPAR running 1 machine and the LPAR has 64 cores. The machine, sorry, the server has 64 cores and you are only using 1 LPAR with 1 core. Because you don't have ILMT, then you have to pay for 64 cores instead of the 1 core that you are using the IBM software for. That is very painful. So the story of ILMT is a story of software, a story of services, and money. We thank you for your time. We thank 4Level Solution for the support, and we're ready for your questions. Thank you so much for participating.
Hi, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick one. Some of us joined in the middle of the presentation. Will you be able to share your presentation with us so that we can review offline at our own speed?
Yes, the presentation is being shared right now. It is on YouTube, and it will send you the link for the replay. Not a problem. Thanks.
Hi, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I've got one question. Does it mean now PVU means that software purchase and selling is attached to the number of cores, which should also include the installation of ILMT?
The installation of?
ILMT.
You mean the regions?
Yeah.
Oh, they have a rule for the regions. If you, there's from the hypervisor's system, you can do anything. So what people used to do is if it's a big company, they are in America, in Europe, and in Asia, what they will do then, they will license the software in America. Then
Okay.
now, because of the way the hypervisor can allow it, so they will move the whole system, because in America, they work up to 5 o'clock, then they move it to Africa, which then the software continues under the same license. Then the next day they move it to Asia and so on. So now there's a rule that your moving of system and software in terms of licensing is limited to the region. So the region is like America region and the Europe region. America region, it's your North America and South America. The Europe region is Europe and Africa, and you have the Asia region. So if you move to the other region, there will be a penalty like I explained.
Okay,
It means you're not licensed. Thanks for the question.
sure.
Anything in the chat, Pedro?
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Imbatu?
Yes, my name is Eric Batu. So my question is, recently we had a client, and when I deployed the ILMT, it was able to pick the highest value, which was 120, the PVU value unit. So when I shared the reports, the challenge that we were having is that the VM manager had not connected to the Hyper-V. Okay. So I worked with the infrastructure guys to ensure that the connection was working. And after it connected, it was still reporting 120 PV, 120 as the value unit. And when we checked with the table, metric table, it was supposed to count as 70. That the value of the processor is tapped at 70. So at such a case, what needs to be done to ensure that that value unit is reflected?
Okay, that is very specific. I don't know the details, so I can't really answer you very, very correctly. But broadly speaking, you need to link the VM manager, which is from the ILMT, to go and read the structure of the hypervisor. And it should be done correctly so that it reads the data correctly as well. If it doesn't happen, there might be other problems which for now I can't tell, because then you need to troubleshoot if ever. But there is I have not found, yeah, they might be, but usually at the beginning you don't get it, then you troubleshoot and it shows the correct way. Remember, IBM does not believe on what the hypervisor tells the IBM. So you might say, we locked this partition for the past 2 years. You can see the hypervisor is showing us that it has been locked this and that way. IBM does not believe it. So it's a story of money as well. So you need to troubleshoot. We can talk, you can talk to me later. We'll see if I'll ask a few other more questions to understand exactly what you did and how maybe we can help you.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Not a problem.
Okay.
There's a question, can we count UVU using ILMT? No, ILMT is meant for PVU, Yes, it can show you other metrics as well. It can show you, but it is meant for PVU. Does ILMT apply to security appliances such as Guardium and QRadar? Those are appliances, so I think the licensing for appliances, I don't know, but I don't think it is linked to CPUs. I think they have another model of selling it. I'm not very sure, but if you say that Guardium and QRadar becomes the licensing model becomes based on CPU, if you can increase the CPU on the QRadar appliance and IBM says, hey, now we want to license it that way, then it will apply. But I doubt, because appliances have usually a different model of licensing. But I'll check again for you. I'll come back to that question. But if it is CPU based, meaning core based, then ILMT will apply. But I'm sure it doesn't apply. Does ILMT monitor Red Hat licenses? I believe Red Hat was acquired by IBM, but I'm not sure what type of arrangement is there now. But if they start licensing Red Hat has an application based on CPUs, on cores, then it will be the same principle that will apply. But Red Hat, I believe I went to a Red Hat session last year where they were saying Red Hat will remain like a separate unit to IBM, but I don't know what is the advances for now. But the principle is the same. If they set up a rule that Red Hat will be licensed per core, then ILMT will also apply to that. The UVU licenses, how do you count the UVU? You count them, there is a table for user value units. So they give you a table, and I think there are other methods, but ILMT is not primary for that. Does ILMT monitor your RVUs? Yes, if you look at the ILMT, RVU and PVUs are they are twins, I would say. If you look at your ILMT, you will see that it shows you the RVUs, counting as well. I think I have finished all the questions in the chat. The question of UVU, I will check again, but ILMT is not meant for UVU, although it does show some of the metrics there, but it's not meant for that.
Okay, one more question.
Yes, Mr. Imbatu.
So from my past experiences, I've realized IBM made it mandatory that if a client is running sub-capacity, you need to have ILMT installed in your environment. But you realize that many clients don't have this knowledge with them. So me as a partner, deploying a solution to a client and leaving that environment, that client, because also me as a partner, I don't also know about ILMT. It's something that I've realized many partners and also clients don't understand more about ILMT. So what are the implications? Maybe I've deployed a solution 2 years ago, and now I've heard about ILMT. Maybe IBM are now on our back. They want now to audit our environment. I rush into environment and install ILMT. Are there any implications that I have installed my ILMT late? Are there?
Yes, there are very strong implications. Why? Because you, as a IBM partner, that you're supposed to know that. Then the next thing is that when you are signing the Passport Advantage Agreement, which is there, it is clear. They tell you you need to install ILMT within 90 days. That is what you are signing for. As an IBM business partner, you must be advising the customer. The moment you are installing this software, you should advise the customer. There's thousands and cases where the IBM partner and customers are clashing because of lack of information. That's why we're organizing these free sessions, just for people to be aware, because also there's no training on ILMT. We are probably the only ones that are running these things for free and getting this awareness around. And at the same time, we also have a training of our own, which we are running time to time for IBM business partners and IBM customers. So it is compulsory. The moment you, as I said, the moment you install any IBM software, which they tell you in the contract, which is on hypervisors, it is compulsory. It is mandatory that you install ILMT within 90 days. If they come 2 years later, they don't find it, yes, they can be lenient. That is their own, it is their product. They can give you a leniency, but they will be in the right to charge you for the past 2 years that you didn't have ILMT because you don't have data. The data must be collected every quarter, every 90 days. So when they come after 2 years, because remember, it shows which day you installed that software. After 2 years, they expect 8 sets of data minimum. If you don't have it, they are in the right because they will show you the contract that you signed, you as a customer. And the customer will be very angry against you as a business partner because you did not tell them. So yes, they will charge you. Thanks.
Well put. Thank you.
We have 10 minutes left. I'll check the chat again. And no questions in the chat. Okay. If there are no questions, I think we will end our session. But for those that felt they were not satisfied, you can contact us at admin@kisalu.com or sales@kisalu.com. And you can also contact us on other channels, our YouTube, our LinkedIn, and so on. And we will be running our training in January, 27th of January, for those that would like to participate. The training is, okay, it's difficult for us to do it online because people do actual calculations, actual logging into the system. We don't have the facility yet to do it remotely, but we can check on that. But it's running from Johannesburg. I saw somebody wanted to ask something. Who's that? Sandeep? Or okay, there is no hand. All right, I think we will end the session for now. For those that would like to carry on, they can contact us later. It was a pleasure spending this time with you. We hope you learned something small or of big for you. And we thank 4Levels Solution for supporting and sponsoring this session. And we thank you all for participating, and we look forward to a brighter, yes, sir? Somebody? It's a microphone noise. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and enjoy your festive season, and all the best for the new year coming 2021. Thanks, and bye from us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.